On the 31st of July 1917, 100 years ago today, an attack was launched on the fields of Flanders. Passchendaele, the name, the place, will forever be synonymous with the quagmire of the battlefield and above all the terrifying massacre of a generation of men, leaving 500,000 dead or wounded. Well, today we remember all those who lost their lives and those who survived but bore the terrible scars of Passchendaele.
There was no front line, there was no line at all. It was just a series of posts scraped in the mud. The Germans were shelling them the whole time. There was mud to your right and mud to your left, and you had to face it and go on.
It was a terrible place, just a sea of mud everywhere. If you got off the duck boards, you'd got no chance whatsoever. You just fell in the mud and you were drowned.
All day long, one had nothing to do but to sit in the mud, shivering, wet and cold, and try to keep up appearances in some way or another as the shells arrived. The noise would grow into a great crescendo, and at a certain point, your nerve would break and you'd throw yourself down in the mud and cringe in the mud till it was past.
As you laid down on the ground, you could literally feel your heart pounding against the ground. And in a continuous bombardment, which lasted sometimes for hours, the emotional strain was absolutely terrific. Until, when you got the order to advance, it was a sort of release from that bondage.
We heard one of their big ones coming over, and I was too damn tired even to fall down. I stood there. Next, I had a terrific pain in the back and the chest, and I found myself face downwards in the mud. And then I suddenly realized that I was alive, that if these wounds didn't prove fatal, that I should get back to my parents, to my sister, to the girl that I was going to marry.
I've seen men coming out covered in mud. They just scraped the mud from their eyes. You know, wanted to go to that sector again. It's the horrors of Passchendaele.
Good evening from Tynecott Cemetery in Belgium. We have just heard vivid recollections from men who served on the front line, haunting memories, but their testimonies remain strong and vital in reminding us of the horrors that unfolded for humanity 100 years ago and of the devastating human cost of that war. Well, earlier today, a service of solemn remembrance was held here at Tynecott, the largest Commonwealth War Graves Commission cemetery in the world, where almost 47,000 men are buried or commemorated on the memorial wall. Around 8,000 people applied through a special ballot to be part of these events. They all had a common purpose: to give thanks and remember their fathers, grandfathers, uncles, great-uncles and close relatives who fought in the Battle of Passchendaele. Some were tragically killed in these fields, others survived to share their memories. Dan Snow was joined by one of the descendants attending the ceremony this morning.
Linda, your father, Romain, had the most extraordinary career in the army. He joined up just after the outbreak of war, served all the way through, right till the end. Did he ever talk about those experiences?
A little bit, on a very light level. He never talked about the feelings, the fear, the dread. He talked about some of the awful things, like having to make their own ammunition, being continually wet, foot rot, being gassed, but never what it felt like.
And did he talked to you, his daughter, about it quite a lot, did he? He was happy to?
He did. I think he was 53 when I was born, and so it was quite distant from his wartime experiences, and that made it easier for him.
But you also have an uncle who fought here at Passchendaele.
Yes, it was my father's younger brother, Walter. He joined up in 1916 as soon as he was old enough, and he was killed in 1917, so he was just 19 years old.
It must be very special for you being here today.
It is very special. I think it's to remember my uncle, but also to think about my father and what he went through, and to have a chance to say thanks, Dad.
Well, it's great for us all to have that chance. Thank you very much, Linda.
Well, this morning's ceremony took place in amongst the thousands of headstones here behind me, each one made from white Portland stone. These headstones were erected by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, who today ensure that every grave is cared for with the respect and the dignity that it deserves.
On the Western Front in 1914, the British Army had no way of organising and recording the burial places of soldiers who died. And the numbers were staggering at that stage in the war, and it was clear that the death toll was only going to rise. Fabian Ware and his small team began to record the burial places of British soldiers, wherever they'd died, wherever they'd been buried by their comrades, and that gradually developed into what we know as the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. Today we commemorate 1.7 million men and women who lost their lives in the two world wars. We've got 23,000 different sites in 154 different countries and territories all over the world, in every continent except Antarctica. The biggest is Tyncott Cemetery in Flanders. Here there are 11,961 graves. 3/4 of them are unidentified. After the end of the war, Tyncott was a sea of wooden crosses. Then gradually over the course of the 1920s, the War Graves Commission created the cemetery that you see today. They installed the headstones, they created the cemetery architecture, the walls and the shelter buildings, and of course the memorial here. And from those very early days, the Commission's gardeners make sure that this continues to be a place that people can come and pay their respects and reflect on what happened 100 years ago.
In the beginning, the idea was to create English country gardens for these men to lie amongst, for people to get a sense of this was a corner of England, as it were. And that was very important to families visiting immediately after the First World War. And we still try to maintain that today.
My dad started working in '46 for the War Graves Commission until the end of his life. And then in '80, I started. That's 37 years. It's like a part of yourself. When you are here, you feel close to the soldiers who are buried here.
There's almost 40,000 herbaceous plants, 2,500 roses, and 3.3 hectares of grass. It takes us 2 days to mow it, but then you have the pruning, you have the weeding. It's quite a job to do it, but yeah, it's done with love.
Beneath the Cross of Sacrifice is the Tyncott Blockhouse, the largest German pillbox in this area. You can still see a small area of concrete within a wreath as a reminder of how strong a position it was. Once it had been captured, it was used as an advanced dressing station to help treat those who were wounded. The majority of the graves here, they're in long rows, evenly spaced, and they're the graves that were brought here later. But those battlefield graves around the bunker, they are exactly where they were when they were first put there, buried by their comrades as the battle was still raging.
The battlefield cemetery, that's my favorite part. It's very sad. If you stand there, I think you can feel it a bit. I'm very lucky to work here. I'm very happy to can do something for these people who make sure that we can live in a peaceful country.
And the cemetery was looking beautiful as everyone gathered for the start of the commemorations to pay tribute to the courage and loss of those men who fought a century ago. His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, together away from the rest of the formation, leaving one single gap. Well, that draws events to a close here in Belgium. a battle 100 years ago on the fields of Flanders left behind a shattered, broken landscape, and in its wake, 500,000 men killed or wounded. Passchendaele touched the lives of so many families from all corners of the earth. They lost fathers, brothers, sons and husbands. And so, on this centenary, in the words of the poet Siegfried Sassoon, we look down and swear by the slain of the war, we'll never forget. From the entire BBC team in Belgium, thank you and bye-bye.